Today we are jumping right into a critique of a piece looking at the societal rise of casual misandry across pop culture, education, and media.
Yeah, it's a really compelling premise, and I think we can dive straight into the first issue.
Right. So the emotional weight of the argument is occasionally undermined by language that frankly distracts from the core analytical points.
Absolutely. The main weakness there is that the text relies on, well, highly inflammatory phrasing.
Like referring to women as broads or calling artists a lobotomized Rapunzel.
Yeah, or a superficial hoe, which was another one. And that just risks alienating neutral readers, you know? It gives critics an easy excuse to completely dismiss the really well-researched points about double standards.
Okay, but I have to ask, the raw passion is kind of what gives it its edge, right? Like, is there a risk that just sanitizing the language completely strips away the provocative tone they're going for?
I totally get that concern, I do. But my suggestion is to refine the lexicon to keep that sharp edge without crossing into, personal insults.
Right, making it about the structure instead.
Exactly. Keep the focus entirely on structural hypocrisy. So, as a concrete example, instead of calling Sabrina Carpenter a superficial hoe, you pivot the focus to the pop industry machinery.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, you describe her branding as, say, a highly synthesized commodification of casual misandry.
Wow, that sounds way more authoritative.
Right? Clinical precision hits way harder, and you just replace broads with commentators or critics. It keeps the bite, but saves your intellectual authority.
Makes total sense. Moving on, the integration between the pop culture analysis and the empirical educational data feels somewhat disjointed, leaving a gap in the causal narrative.
Yeah, that's definitely the weakness in this section. It abruptly shifts from analyzing pop lyrics directly into statistical data about OECD grading biases.
Right, and the 12% drop in humanities enrollments.
Exactly, but without any connective tissue explaining how media attitudes actually reflect or drive those institutional outcomes.
It's like reading the notes, it feels like a court case. We have our character witnesses, like the pop stars, and then forensic evidence, the OECD data.
That is a perfect analogy.
But the lawyer hasn't actually told the jury how the two connect.
Right, so the suggestion here is to create an explicit structural bridge. You have to actively link the cultural devaluation of masculinity in media to the institutional neglect of young men in education.
Oh, so framing them as interconnected symptoms of the exact same shift.
Yes. For a concrete example, you could drop a transitional paragraph right after the Chappelle Rowan and Sabrina Carpenter sections.
Saying what, exactly?
Something like, this cultural casualness toward dismissing men doesn't exist in a vacuum. It bleeds directly into our institutions. And then you bring in the OECD data.
Oh, showing how girls being rewarded for compliance mirrors the music industry dismissing manchildren.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates a systemic preference for docility over traditional masculine traits. Making that causal link explicit is really what ties the whole argument together.
That's a great fix. And with that linked, we can look at the final piece. The intriguing observation about the disconnect between female literary fantasies and Hollywood casting choice stops short of exploring underlying economic or demographic counterarguments.
Right. The weakness here is that contrasting the traditional beefcakes of romance literature with modern Hollywood's passive simps is a really sharp observation. But the text assumes it's purely ideological.
Right, without acknowledging that, Hollywood casting might just be driven by broader global market trends.
Exactly. Or shifting consumer demographics.
I mean, couldn't someone argue that Hollywood is just optimizing for a wider audience? Like catering to international box offices or younger demographics influenced by K-pop?
They absolutely could, and that is exactly the counter-argument skeptics will use. So the suggestion is to anticipate and actively deconstruct those alternative explanations to make the argument bulletproof.
How would they do that in practice, though?
Well, for a concrete example, you briefly acknowledge those international demands or global trends, like you just said, but then you dismantle it by highlighting the quote they already included from producer Brad Simpson.
Oh, right, the one about the sheer inability to find traditional actors for the JFK Jr. role?
Exactly. That proves it's a supply-side ideological deficit in the talent pipeline, not just a demand-side market force.
That's brilliant. It shuts the skeptics right down.
Precisely. Anticipating those counter-arguments makes the piece essentially bulletproof.
Well, to recap this critique, the material has a really powerful core thesis regarding societal double standards, but we have 3 actionable steps to maximize its impact.
Right. First, elevate the vocabulary to replace personal insults with sharp systemic critiques.
Second, build a clear narrative bridge between the pop culture analysis and the OECD educational stats.
And third, bulletproof the Hollywood versus literature argument by anticipating and dismantling those market-based counterarguments.
Exactly. So we invite the listener to revise and submit the work back and again for further feedback. It's like taking down a flawed building, you know? You don't just wildly swing a sledgehammer blindfolded.
Right. You use a series of precisely placed, calculated charges.
Exact. Make these edits, place your charges precisely, and watch the whole flawed structure come down.